Hey guys. What's up? This is Dead Money time. I got some more stories today. I mentioned in episode 1 that I'm here for therapy. So if you're listening, then I suppose you're worthy of calling yourself a therapist, if you're so inclined. You don't have to, though. Although this isn't that much different from when I do sit down with my actual therapist. Instead of doing all the talking, I only do most of it. She probably thinks her job is really easy, at least with me, because I barely let her do anything else. I don't even know why I don't just stay home. It's not like I have to pay myself $150 to sit on the couch for 1 extra hour every week. I guess it wouldn't matter if I did have to pay myself $150. But what I'm doing here, I am essentially just talking to myself. And in fact, speaking into this therapy microphone is only so different from what I do at home anyway. I walk around my house sometimes just pacing back and forth, talking to myself out loud. Probably trying to solve some stupid predicament I got myself in, most likely involving a woman. You know what? It's kind of fun. You'd be surprised at some of the things you say. Because besides, don't you get bored of thinking? I sure do. So, once in a while I just speak to myself. What is it, a big fucking deal? Now, I don't do this when other people are around, since they'll probably think I'm talking to them, and understandably so, but if you haven't done this before, try it sometime. Life is a lot more fun when you do weird things. Anyway, so yeah, 2 more stories today that I have to get out of people behaving quite foolishly at the poker table, and me getting really angry in response. But before I begin, let me just clarify something from episode 1. The insufferable behavior that I have been referring to pertains only to what goes on in the 2-5 player pool and no-limit games smaller than that. People don't necessarily act like this in all poker games. You get varying social breeds depending on the stakes or what game is being played. For instance, a table of 20-40 mixed game players is not going to be the same as a table of 2-5 no-limit players. And that's actually what I missed the most about playing games higher than 2-5, because as you move up in stakes, in a linear manner, so too does the table's maturity level. People are both more respectful and far more adept at carrying out the most basic forms of interaction. Now, there's obviously still bullshit, since people are people. There's bullshit at all the games, but it's different bullshit, and there's less of it. Now, the reason I stopped playing higher consistently was because I just had enough of the daily vicious bloodbath that comes with high-limit poker. I was nose deep in it for more than 7 years. I was satisfied, so I lowered the stakes because it's less stressful. Or so I had thought. Now I'm not so sure, because apparently there's quite a bit more to poker stress than just the swings. And sometimes I really want to just move back up so I can get the fuck away from the cesspool that is 2-5. And I still might. But alright, so here's a tale of anger from either 2022 or 23. So I was in seat 2, and in seat 7 was this Asian guy, which meant he was about as far away from me as you can be at the table. When the hand started, he had like $400 and I had him covered. I always buy in with the $1,500 max because my balls are enormous. Yeah! When he and I played this pot, I had pocket 7s and the button, so I had position. I think the board was something like 10-7, 5-8. All I know besides that is I had a set. The turn is when the money got in. I don't remember the action, but he raised me and he put his entire stack in except for $3. There were $3 blue chips still in front of him, and rather than say all in to make sure every last dollar he had went into the pot, I just picked up a bunch of black and green chips and mashed them in front of me to signal to the dealer that I was putting him all in. Now, the player didn't say or do anything with those $3. He just left them there. The dealer put out the river, which was a brick. My opponent showed pocket kings, so I won. But when the dealer started pushing me the pot, that's when I told him, hey, those last $3 are in play as well. In Vegas, in 2-5, the dollar chips cannot be wagered unless you're going all in. So in other words, you cannot bet $312 with money behind. But if you're going all in, then you can. Otherwise, any other bet size has to be in an increment of $5. So now the dealer notices the $3 and tells the player. Except now, the player starts fighting tooth and nail, claiming he does not have to give up the $3, declaring that I didn't go all in, and that all I did do was call his raise. Now, this was sort of about $3, but not for the most part. So here's what the situation was actually about. You see, because he left $3 in front of him, that means if I put him all in, raising him his last $3, even though he's already wagered more than 99% of his stack, technically, I am the last aggressor. Because for him to put in his last $3, now he has to call my raise. Technically, I raised him $3 into a pot that was now over $800. So this means, win or lose, he gets to see my hand because I was the last aggressor. I have to show my hand first. If he had gone all in himself and I call him, now he is the last aggressor and he has to show his hand first and is not guaranteed to see my hand unless I win, of course. So he's just trying to manipulate the situation. He wants to go all in, but will only do so if he knows he will see my hand and knows he will get himself out of showing his hand if he loses. But because the dealer fucked up, he didn't realize I went all in. He thought I just called the bet. And I think he even thought we were both all in. I don't know what he thought because he wasn't paying attention. But this is why my opponent showed his hand first, because he was not aware that he was put all in. He thought I called and that was it. So this is why he's refusing to give up his $3, because this that would foil his entire plan. So under no circumstances was this person willing to both lose his entire stack and have to show his hand first. One way or another, he was going to get one over. He's either getting to muck his hand in the event he loses literally everything in front of him, or he's keeping his last $3 in the event he has to show his hand first but loses. If he has to show his hand first but wins, then he'll either forego the last $3 he could have won, or, if he's an especially gigantic chump, now he will try to get that paid off too. I really wish there was some type of rule preventing people from doing this, but there still is not. Now, there is one other element to all of this nonsense. If you have a dealer that's paying attention and enforcing the rules, they will not have treated this situation like we're all in on the turn because there's still money in front of both remaining players. They'll effectively just pull the money in that has been officially wagered, and they'll deal the river as if nothing tacky is going on. And had this dealer done that, then it just would have been the opponent's action to either check the river or go all in for $3, maintaining the same dilemma for both of us as before. But that aside, because he lost and showed his hand first, now this guy is fighting to the death over keeping those last $3. And I was telling the dealer I went all in because I put in way more than $400. But this player was continuing to argue, and the dealer was not resolving this at all. So then I said, call the floor because this was crazy. Then I thought, I really don't want to need a floor man to settle this because it's ridiculous. And now we're going to waste an even more exorbitant amount of time than we already are. The dealer even said to me, looking at me like he wanted me to just let it go, saying it's only $3, I said to him, using his name, that it's irrelevant how much money it is. And I said it a second time, emphasizing the word irrelevant. Because it is irrelevant. This is strictly principle. And I'm not letting this little shit scam me out of $3, all because he ended up having to show his fucking hand first. No way. Fuck him.
You lose.
And I don't know what it is, but it seems like every single time this exact scenario happens, it's always done by the exact same player profile. So I am not being racist when I say this. I don't know if it's a cultural thing or what, but every time I see someone pull this crap, it's always an Asian player who bought in short. I'm not saying every Asian who buys in short does this. I'm just saying every time I've seen it happen, it's both of those things. So whatever. I don't really care what he looks like. All that matters is he's carrying on, and all this is getting louder and louder. At one point I yelled at him, "Okay, if I let you keep the $3, do you promise to shut up for the rest of the day?" I was hoping to get a laugh when I said that, but no one did. Probably because things were so heated. There were a couple regular players in the game that day who I didn't really know but had some rapport with, and while all this was going on, I was also wondering, gee, I wonder what they think of me now, because they've never seen me act like this. I'm always quiet as a mouse, but now out of nowhere I'm going apeshit. So after all this arguing and back and forth, the player finally gives up the $3. But that's not even why I wanted the $3, because I wanted $3. I only cared so much about keeping it. What I cared about was him losing that money just for a temporary period. So by design, after about 15 or 20 seconds, then I said to him, "Here, you want your $3 back? Here." And I threw him across the table. And he kept it. I did all this for two reasons. One, I don't want anyone to think I'm some cheap fuck, because that could hurt my action, and that is simply not worth it. And there are too many players in the 2-5 pool who would be too likely to think I was being cheap, because they're too damn ignorant to understand the very basic importance of this principle. And whenever you have to explain something to someone that's really obvious, they're not going to get it. They're going to either get it on their own because it's clear as day, or they won't no matter what you tell them. Now, the other reason is, as I think I said before, I didn't care about the $3 as much as not letting this little twerp pull this fucking shit. I wanted him to accept and live in a reality where he had to show his hand first, lose, and give up the final $3 on top of it, because it's not my fucking fault the dealer wasn't paying attention. This is what I wanted this little man's reality to be for just a short while. Just enough for it to sink in, and enough for him to be fucking miserable about the fact that this time his little stupid petty trick didn't work. Once I got all of those things, then I was satisfied. So fine, here, take your $3 back and have a ball with it, you fucking pathetic piece of shit. He'll never figure it out. Probably. And if not, then this is probably why he's just another losing player. Because he's so preoccupied with having his way in these worthless situations that he overlooks everything else you need to actually have any sort of shot at winning. And this isn't the only scenario where players insist on having a dirty fight over a small pittance. Sometimes players go all in and lose, and they either don't realize the dollar chips are in play, so they hang on to them, or they do realize it but just try to keep it anyway because there are more than just a few people who play poker that will do anything to get over on you, no matter how little it is. And because so many dealers are too lazy to actually do their job and tell the player that money is in play, now I have to get it myself. So I'll tell the dealer softly, without looking at the player, that money is mine. But once the player learns that you're asking for his last $1 or $2, after you just stack them for $1,000 or who cares how much, now they get mad at you as if you're being some cheap fuck bad winner for wanting to be paid what you had just won fair and square. And these people have, of course, no idea what incredibly huge babies they're being. It's like because I beat them, now I owe them a favor. I owe them $2 in charity. Yeah, like hell. When's the last time a perfect stranger came up to you on the street and demanded you give them $2 and you just complied? When's the last time you did that? Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's no different than what happens in poker. But because people take losing so personally at 2-5 and so badly, they still think you owe them something. It's just like, God, I won a $2,000 pot or a $4,000 pot. Who cares how big the pot is? What am I, a rich fucking man now? Oh, that's it. That did it. I've reached it. This pot puts me over the top. Now I can retire. So here, good sir, have a free dollar on me. Go fuck yourself. And the funniest part is they think you are the one that's making a big deal about this and that you are the cheapskate because you want this apparent last meaningless dollar. Well, my question is, if the dollar is so goddamn insignificant, then why are you having a shit fit about it? These people are completely oblivious to the fact that they're actually making a much bigger deal about this than you are. But like I've been saying, poker brings out the worst in people and never more so than when they lose. Oh well. Anyway, on to the next fit of rage. So I've had some huffing and puffing with dealers before, but unless I've forgotten something, nothing ever got that dramatic. But this past December, I had by far the biggest back and forth heated argument with a dealer I've ever had. I showed up in the morning. The World Poker Tour was going on, so there's a lot of extra dealers and floor staff on hand. And this woman was someone who had dealt to me before over somewhat sort of extended time periods. But then one day she's gone and you don't see her until it's extra busy again. Now, she's competent, she pays attention, she's accurate, she's fast. She definitely knows I'm a reg. She's friendly with the players. And if she stuck a gun in my mouth and said, fuck me or I'll blow your brains out instead of you, I'd attempt to say that sticking the gun in my mouth wasn't necessary. I suppose neither was that little bit of information, but the point is, up until this day, I was always happy when she was dealing my table. So the trouble began when a pot was going on with two other players that I hadn't been paying fully attention to. But then I looked up and just happened to see the dealer had $4 on the rake slide. And the maximum rake at the win is $5, and they graduate it by taking $1 each when the pot hits $10, $30, $50, I think $70, and $100. Then I looked out at the pot, and if a pot is small enough for you to eye measure it, then it's obviously pretty small. And it didn't look like it had more than $50 in it, maybe $60. But I wasn't going to say anything until the hand was over, and now I would know she's going to drop $4 instead of $3. I don't think dealers fuck up the rake all the time, but it's not that unusual. And while I'm not on rake police all day long, since the last thing I want to think about is doing the dealer's job, I definitely pay more attention when the dealer appears completely clueless. And there's a lot more of those when the room is jam-packed, like it is this time of year. But otherwise, I only notice this during times like now, when my head just so happens to be moving in the precise direction so that the pot and rake both pass through my field of vision. One time I was getting my ass kicked for like a half hour straight. I finally won a hand, but the dealer was over-raking by $1, so I told him. And he fixed it. And then I said, I don't mind losing to them. I just don't want to lose to that. And I pointed at the rake slide. I think they call it a gator. Like what, alligator? Eat your money? But whatever. Just dealing with the rake is another thing I really miss about playing higher. Because you just pay time rake every 30 minutes, and that's it. This shit can't even come up. So the hand ended at the same point I started noticing this. And right before she's about to drop the rake, I said, you're dropping too much. And that's about the way I said it. I mean, I wasn't hostile. I just said it with like a touch of urgency so that I'd stop her in time. Then she said the pot has $80, which meant she is dropping the correct rake. And when she said that, I just said, oh, okay, almost like a knee-jerk reaction because she sounded so sure of herself. And then as she was pushing the pot to the winner, now I finally saw the $25 green chip that had been shielded by the other chips from where I was sitting. So, I was mistaken. Happens very rarely, but it happened that day. Now, it doesn't matter that I wasn't the winner of this pot, because had she been mistaken, that dollar belongs on the table. But after this happened, the guy who did win the pot was sitting a few seats away from me, and he got confused for a moment. And I just said to him it's nothing. I just thought she was raking too much. Which I felt like was me acknowledging to the dealer that she had not. Then he said, oh, no, yeah, there was like $80 in there, but good looking out. And then I said, you have to watch in this place. And I said that kind of sardonically because the overall dealer quality at the Wynn has gone way down the last few years, and I've had a lot of frustration with them fucking up the rake and a lot of other routine things. But I did not make any specific reference to our dealer. And take my word for that or not, I don't really give a shit, because as my invisible and inaudible therapist, I gain nothing by lying to you. And I am not on the air just to try and make myself look all innocent and victimized by everybody. This is simply what happened that day. So I think this matter has just come and gone and is already ancient history, but then this dealer snarls quite aggressively and sarcastically, yeah, I've only been dealing at the Wynn for 6 years. Why would I know the rake?
What the fuck?
And yeah, this is when things turned. And I made a point to write everything down about this whole exchange the moment it was done with. Because like I mentioned in episode 1, when that blonde woman called me a misogynist, that after these back and forth tit-for-tat arguments are over and you're trying to repeat it to someone later, you can never recall the story with more than like 15% accuracy because you were so flustered when it happened. Well, that wasn't going to happen this time. So I snap-filed everything into my short-term memory, which, at one time, was in the 98th percentile. Now, the reason I know that is because when I was 16, I took some specialized testing series of, I don't even know what to call it, but I took them because throughout my entire prison sentence, school, none of my parents or teachers could ever figure out why or how I was so smart and so dumb at the same time. So they tested me on all kinds of things to hopefully find out what my deal was. And among their findings, that's how good my short-term memory turned out to be. Now, it's certainly not as good as it used to be for 2 reasons. Well, firstly, I've smoked enough weed for the last 18 years to cover a lawn on a 50-acre estate. And secondly, about 4 years ago, my black belt Muay Thai sparring partner beat the shit out of me for 3 rounds of 3 minutes. And I am not a black belt. So I lost a few soldiers that day, because I definitely still have some mild brain damage. And that sort of thing gets to be very recognizable when you're looking for your phone or your keys while they're already in your hand. But it's okay, because the memory lapses are never about anything critical. Like, I don't forget which side of the road to drive on. I can still remember anything that's really important to me, and remembering the order of this conversation fell under that category. So the first thing I said back to her was, I wasn't talking to you. And now I was getting annoyed. And then she said, very aggressively, that I was looking at her, and I said, no, I wasn't. And now I really cannot believe what complete bullshit this fucking person was speaking, because this is just black and white. I was either looking at her or I wasn't. And when is the last time you were talking to the person next to you, but looking at the person in front of you? And my head and neck are not on a loose swivel, okay? I still have, at all times, brain damage or not, total control of which direction I would like to point my face. And forget about looking at her. I was not even thinking about her anymore when I was talking to this player in seat 3 because, once again, to that point, she had done her job. But now she was fucking up. But she called the floor over, which wasn't a floor man I knew, unfortunately. It was this woman I'd never seen before. It was just one of the new faces for the tournament series. And the dealer said seat 6 has a problem with me. Now, when you're in this situation, I advise to not hold up the game and make a whole scene in front of the table like a 5th grader whining to his teacher that someone took his pencil. So I got off the table and took a few steps away and explained to this floor lady everything that happened from the top. And when you're complaining about something or someone to a supervisor of sorts, if you admit to any wrongdoings or mistakes you might have made, they're more likely to believe everything else. So the floor lady heard me out, and she didn't do anything right then and there. There's not really much for her to do in this situation except listen. So I go back to the table, but the dealer is still talking some stupid high school shit to a couple players at the table. You know, making like these obnoxious, giggly comments that only she and they can hear. And it's not like she waited for me to come back to do that. She's been doing that the whole time I was away. I didn't get loud at any point this time like I did in the other story, but then I said, "Are you still going on about this?" And then she says, this time, with this really smart-ass smile on her face, "No, I wasn't talking to you." Ha ha! Pretty clever. This is getting to be a pretty good battle now.
Fight!
So I said right back, "Oh, okay, so now you know how it feels." Then those two players she was scoring points with started horning in on this, telling me to let it go and stuff like that. And then the dealer made one more comment, but that one I forgot. Like I said, brain damage. And then some brief silence went by, but I was still not satisfied because this whole thing was just appalling. And it's funny because this whole time that this was going on, I was aware that I was like really letting my ego take over here. And while that was upsetting, I can forgive myself for letting it happen because poker is my livelihood. But now I have this dealer who'd always been good with me in the past. Clearly wasn't sincere, just tip soliciting. Because now she's suddenly shooting her mouth off completely the moment she even thought her judgment was being slightly called into question. So she's just one of those people who you can't tell anything to, no matter what it is. And this is not about, her job, because I've dealt poker before, so I know what her job is like. Now, I haven't dealt for 6 years at the Wynn, like she declared. And by the way, that's actually completely, totally overblown. She made that sound like she's been this full-time fucking dealer the whole time. No. First of all, there are very few full-time poker dealers anywhere. And second of all, dealing at the Wynn for a month or two here and there over the course of 6 years is not the same thing as actually doing it for 6 years. As for my experience, well, I dealt the World Series of Poker twice in 2018 and 19. And in between those two, I dealt the Winter World Poker Tour Series at the Bellagio. But I don't go around telling people I've dealt for 3 years. I'd say altogether I've dealt for about 6 months with a lot of weeks of 50 hours or more. And let me tell you, I had to push through a lot of insecurities to be a dealer because I figured everyone who saw me dealing, after they were done giving me the double take, probably just assumed I was broke.
God damn it.
And understandably so, because why else would a poker player suddenly be dealing? Well, in my case, I was just really mentally burnt out by playing full-time for about a decade, but I still wanted to do something, and dealing poker was undoubtedly the best paying job that I could just get. So, I got on the other side of the table for a little while, and while every job has its drawbacks, it was a fun little shenanigan. And the most important thing I learned was, poker is hard no matter which side of the table you're on. Playing, dealing, it doesn't matter. This is tough. But in all my time in the box, I was never tempted, even one time, to talk to a player like that because I had all the personality dispositions necessary for dealing just like I did for playing. And they're two totally different sets of dispositions, but some people have both. So whenever a player snapped at me over something, whether it was because I actually fucked up or not, it never really fazed me because dealing poker is a thankless job. Much like umpiring baseball, which is also something I did all throughout my teens and into my 20s. And as a poker dealer, you need to accept that because poker players are animals, like Little League coaches, oftentimes you are going to not be treated like a person.
I don't like you.
And me especially because I'm just some fucking white guy. She's at least a woman. She at least has tits and foolhardy men desperately trying to suck up to her by giving her an extra $1 here and there. But nobody gives a shit about me. And I'm fine with that because why should they? I have every world advantage imaginable. Only when I'm dealing poker do I have to give a little of it back. Being a white male poker dealer is like a zebra going for a swim with a bunch of crocodiles. Things tend not to work out for the zebra. One time at the Bellagio, I was dealing limit hold'em, which is sort of like being in a room full of Oscar the Grouch clones on steroids. And this Indian player roared at me like a dinosaur. "What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?" I said nothing, and I smiled at him. But this dealer today, as good as she is at everything else she does in the box, she handled this tiny uncertainty just as badly. The only thing I can really say on her behalf is she didn't call me a misogynist, unlike that other cracker. But here's the most important thing. Even if I was being a prick to her on purpose, you can't go off on a player like that. And no great dealer would. Now, I'm not saying it's their job to just be a punching bag, but you have to be professional. So if a player is getting really out of line, just call the floor man over and let them handle it. That is what they are for. So I was still just very unnerved by all this, and after a few minutes of silence, I said to the dealer, I don't want to use her name, so let's just call her Squeaky. I calmly said to her, Squeaky, you're a good dealer, but your attitude is atrocious. And that she didn't really respond to because she knows it's true. But then the player who had just spoken before said to me, let it go, you're being an asshole. Which at this point was now the most out of line anyone had been to anybody. All I said back to him was, I am not the first person to tell her that, I promise. And then some other shit was spewed back and forth. But then another floor man was walking by and he told all of us to just knock it off, and then that was it. But then, a short while later, that player who called me an asshole, he got stacked. Now, he didn't play bad, he just got fucked by the deck in a coin flip situation, but nevertheless, it made me happy to see him lose. And it was extra funny because there was no doubt that he was Jewish too. He looked just like me, only uglier and with a bigger nose. So after that hand was over, he quit. But as he was getting up, I was just looking at him and watching him walk away with a really faint smile on my face, and I kept my eyes on him until he turned and looked at me. And after about 0.2 of a second of eye contact, I looked away and he left. Life's petty little victories. That whole situation upset me for the rest of the day. I mean, my blood was up the whole time. I did not feel normal for the rest of the day. I was upset that this dealer just reacted like that out of nowhere. And I was upset that I let myself get pulled into this garbage. But what can I say? I mean, it's just hard not to sometimes. Because these kinds of things just happen so many times over the course of life. How do you stay out of it every time? Even when you know you're just dealing with a person who is prone to being super belligerent. Because this was actually not the first time I saw this dealer behave something like this. I didn't remember it until a little bit after this was all done with, but a number of months before that, one day she was a floor supervisor and a player was complaining to her about something. And I don't remember what the issue was, but it was coming from a player who was always making a stink about something, so it was probably something pointless. But when he was telling her what he needed in front of everybody, she was looking at him and smiling that smile like she can't believe what he's trying to make her do, and it was printed on her face that she wanted to go off on him too. This time she restrained herself because she wasn't dealing that day. Now I figured since she's dealing the World Poker Tour that I'd probably be seeing her for at least the next few weeks, but to my most pleasant surprise, I have not seen her since. I have no idea what happened, but whatever it was, when the World Series of Poker starts up again in about 4 months, I'll be bracing myself for her return to the win when she comes back to deal her 7th year. You know, every time the dust settles from a situation like this, I always reflect on it and think about every choice I made and everything I said, and I scrutinize what I could have or should have done differently, if anything. And what I've got is, when the hand ended and I thought she was dropping too much rake, sure, I suppose I could have asked her to spread the pot for a second so that I can see if there are any higher denomination chips hidden away from my view, and if there are, then I guess I can tell her she's dropping too much. But I didn't think to do that because I wasn't mad yet. I mean, I was just telling her. So asking her to spread the pot just did not seem necessary. Just like her lashing out at me for merely thinking she may have made a mistake. Or thinking she did make a mistake. You know, this all slightly reminds me of what goes on in Singapore, where they'll put you in prison there for 40 years if they catch you spitting on some grass. And while I respect the fact they don't want you to spit, is locking someone up for 40 years, or whatever it is, over that also really necessary? Shouldn't the punishment fit the crime? And if there is no crime, like in my freaking case, shouldn't there be... You know what? Fuck this. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm done. Therapy is over. Thanks, guys. Have a nice day. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.